Look at this absolute circus. We are hemorrhaging cash, your cash, to teach migrants how to speak the language of the country they forced their way into. We are looking at £250 million set on fire while our own pensioners freeze and our veterans sleep in doorways. But it's not just about the money, it's about the sheer scale of the betrayal. Listen closely to what they're admitting here. They know the integration has failed. They know the numbers are catastrophic. And yet, their only solution is to throw more of your tax money at the problem.
Journalist and broadcaster Linda Jubilee, Conservative Tory peer Shaun Bailey, Lord Shaun Bailey, should I say, and ex-Labour advisor Matthew Larser. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Linda, I'll start with you. I think it's really important we have more national conversations about this, because for decades we weren't really talking about immigration, under which time it has now, it's seismic levels, it's disrupting communities, it's causing a lot of tensions, and we're still bringing in people that can't fully speak our language, in some cases can't speak English at all, and the taxpayers having to foot, basically £250 million to pay for it.
There's no question that actually speaking English is the most important thing when it comes to integration, bar none. Now, this is normally done and has been done for decades in this country via something called ESOL, which is teaching English as a second language. Now, this can be done very, very successfully. Even Nadeem Zahawi, who's now joined Reform, arrived in this country, I believe, as an Iraqi refugee, unable to speak a word of English. By the time he was 19 and he left school, he was fluent. So there are remarkable cases when this can happen very successfully. But the problem I have noticed, because I've actually taught some ESOL classes myself, is that you get whole communities, particularly where women are concerned, where they never learn to speak English. The children do. The children are remarkably good at adapting. But my question is, if you want them to learn English, well, you are going to have to provide these ESOL lessons, and they will come at a cost to the taxpayer.
But isn't the point, come on to you, Lord Bailey, isn't the point that people shouldn't be coming to Britain, unless they are, of course, refugees? Well, you can make the exception for this. But 800,000 people not being able to speak English very well and the taxpayer having to fit that bill, those people shouldn't have been brought into Britain in the first place. How can we argue that they're an economic contributor?
I go back to my basic point. We keep mixing up who people are economic migrants with people who are refugees. Yeah. If you're a refugee, it's very unlikely you're going to be speaking English. If you're an economic migrant, we could probably ask that you learn to speak English before you arrive, so you could add to the economy. But I want to focus on this issue around isolation. That's why we have big communities in this country who are completely divorced from the country, cannot integrate, will not integrate, because they don't have command of the basic language. And what's really important as well, it also means they can be exploited. So you get people who are not being paid properly, if they're being paid at all, they have no access to the law. You have some communities where the men dominate everything. Exactly. And the first thing they do is prevent any of the women, and so in many cases the children, from learning English. It means they're in control. But on the flip side, it goes the other way around. I've worked in many immigrant communities across London, and you often have children who rule their household because they've learned English and their parents don't. Yeah. And that can be a very dangerous thing as well, because you do not want your children growing up without adult supervision. The point we have to, the wider point that needs to be looked at, we are stirring up huge social problems. People who have traditionally far larger families than us, you sort of live under the two benefit cap. That's great, but we're all going to have to be paying for that. It's affecting housing, what type of houses we build. Forget if we build enough, just what type we're going to build. All of these problems will have an effect we're locking in for the future.
Bailey is dancing around the edge of the truth here, but he's too polite to say it outright. When he talks about locking in problems for the future, what he actually means is the permanent, irreversible alteration of our society. We aren't just paying for English lessons or rent subsidies, we are financing our own displacement. Think about the audacity of this. The British state is actively subsidising the housing and education of foreign nationals who have no historic tie to this land, driving up demand and locking young British families out of the property market forever. They talk about integration like it's a magic wand that solves everything. But let's be real, if you import hundreds of thousands of people from cultures with values diametrically opposed to Western civilization, teaching them to say hello and thank you doesn't stop the sectarianism, it doesn't stop the radicalization, and it doesn't stop the misogyny that Linda Doberly mentioned. We are paying for the privilege of losing our own communities. The government is effectively telling you to tighten your belt, accept lower living standards and watch your town change beyond recognition, all while they find a magic money tree to build a parallel society for people who just arrived. It's not just incompetence, it feels like a deliberate policy of putting the native population last in the queue for their own national resources.
And the thing I always want people to focus on, when we talk about housing, we are going to be paying many extra people's rent for the rest of their life.
Yep.
The last time I checked, our housing subsidy bill just around rent was over 23 billion, and it's going to go up significantly.
Yeah, Matthew, I'll touch on the slight tangent on it because I brought in the kids' second language as an important example of how quickly the country is changing. In my hometown, my home borough of London, Harrow, 60% of kids, pupils there, English is their second language. Might be mine tonight by the sounds of it. But I think that's showing a rapid change in our demography. That wasn't the case when I was at school there. So I know from my own experience that just living there, that English was the first language of most of the children at that school. And in the short space of, 20 years or so, that is now the second language. That's going to have a massive cultural impact in that area. And it will inevitably cause problems, won't it?
Well, I mean, clearly, I think we all agree that immigration has been, legal migration has been too high for too long. And I don't want to get too party political about it, but we did have the massive Boris bounce where I think that the eyes were taken off the ball, as it were, in terms of who was allowed to enter. In theory, if you're coming on any of the work visas, you have to pass an English language test, and you certainly have to pass an English language test to get your citizenship if you're moving towards that. So, look, I mean, I agree with Linda. I think that, these are a necessary pill to swallow in terms of the cost of the English language lessons, because the cost of not doing it is ultimately much higher in terms both of enabling people to contribute to the economy and also in terms of social integration.
But I think you've got, can I just say, you've got a really big problem here, though, and Shaun touched upon this, with you've got a kind of ghettoised situation in this country, and that is like a powder keg waiting to go off, just in terms of civil unrest or violence or something.
Radicalisation is the big one.
Radicalisation is the big one.
You come to a community, you move abroad, you come to a poor community that's technically even more poor relatively. They are the children, they are the young men in particular that are easier to radicalise.
Of course they are.
But at least if people speak English,
just remind everybody at home, 800,000 people have been on these courses. 800,000 people. That is a lot of people who, in my opinion, cannot contribute to the economy.
Well, hopefully they'll be able to contribute more after the classes. So I think it's a necessary investment.
Why were they here in the first place if they can't contribute? We haven't got 800,000 refugees, so we can write that off, right? So we know these people have come in through visas in some way or another. Why do you think they are here, Matthew?
Well, then I think what happened is that over the last decade is that I know two things. First of all, if people came from the EU, they didn't have to. When we were still in the EU, they didn't have to have an English language test because obviously you had free movement. So some of them may have been topping up their English language skills. I think we know that an awful lot of EU migrants had incredibly good English, but there will be some part of that figure over. I don't know how long that 800,000 is over, but that would have been the case.
Just to clarify, 800,000 speak very bad English.
Right. So I think that mostly won't include the vast majority won't be EU migrants. I think what happened is the rules haven't been applied hard enough. We have seen legal migration start to come down, but the rules are that if you apply for any of the workers' visas, you have to do it. There have been some cases of fraud in people how people have passed the exams. That needs to be clamped down on as well, so that it is a small group of people. And of course, quite a lot of the 800,000 will be dependents, because what happened is a lot of dependents came, particularly in the Boris wave, to whom the test is not applied. That was a mistake, and we talk about the Boris wave, but what's interesting about the Boris wave, I think it was a political failing. Labour never opposed
opposed it.
No,
They were
right.
very for it. Traditionally, Labour have been all over high immigration numbers.
Sean, the Tories won't apologise for it now.
No,
right?
they absolutely should.
Why?
They absolutely should, because I'll tell you why, because of the social pressure it's going to put in this country. There's lots of things in this country that we think are normal and necessary. We look after children who have been in care. We give them the support that they need. Those things are moving towards being nice to haves, and shortly we won't be able to afford.
Can I just say very quickly that I think there is a very big problem with women as well, because these women are really ghettoised. They're really confined, and we already know they come from a culture where, frankly, women are one down, and they are staying one down, and that is leading to all sorts of problems. That's just not to do with language; it's to do with the way women are treated.
It's exploitation.
That has really.
I think that's why the language lessons are important once people are here, but there clearly is a question about whether people should be able to bring dependents to whom those English language tests may not apply in the same way.
We're not even talking here about the cost of translators. In councils, the cost of translators...
Well, hopefully English language lessons are an investment, because it means you have to have less translation down the line.
Did you catch that? Investment. Laser actually has the nerve to call burning your tax money an investment. Let me ask you, what is the return on investment for the British worker? Is it suppressed wages? Is it a fractured society where you're a stranger in your own hometown? Is it the crime waves we see in our major cities? An investment implies a benefit, but the only people benefiting here are the cheap labour lobbyists and the diversity industry consultants. And look at how they try to gaslight you. They frame this as a bureaucratic issue. Oh, we just need to clamp down on the tests. No, the issue is demographic. Patrick Christys hit the nail on the head earlier about Harrow. When you have schools where English is a second language for the majority, you don't have a British school anymore, you have an international holding centre. And Bailey is dead right about one thing. The political class sees us as mugs. They rely on your British sense of fair play and decency to exploit you. They know you'll grumble but keep paying your taxes. They are banking on your passivity while they dismantle the very social fabric that created that decency in the first place.
I totally want to hope, but it's an unnecessary investment.
Let's be clear. The same emotion that makes us provide English lessons, ESOL, means we'll always provide translation. That's a fact. We will do. There's a part of us that are decent people. We think, well, if someone is here, we do need to help them, and that's correct. Sure. But that emotion has been overly tested. It's been corrupted. And many people are gaming the system. What's interesting when you speak to people in the political sphere, this is why I particularly talk about people on the left, they see everybody as a victim, but everybody sees us as mugs. Yeah. And that's a bit what we need to put straight. We should always help people, but we need to draw the line in the sand much earlier and much harder.
Totally
and that's what we failed to do.
Yeah.
It's infuriating to watch them discuss this so calmly, innit? They talk about managing the decline of our nation like it's just another line item on a budget sheet. They admit the system's broken, they admit the culture's fracturing, but they won't do the one thing that actually solves it. Close the door and put British people first. So, I have to ask you, at what point do we stop being the decent mugs they take us for and start getting truly angry about the theft of our country?